I just started looking up the Bret Hart Sanatorium and just started following breadcrumbs. Why is the Bret Hart Sanatorium even in my mind? It's in my mind because my grandmother and her brother were held there for years with no contact from their parents on the suspicion of having tuberculosis. This was the early 1900s. But studying Bret Hart, who the center is named after, this guy right here, Francis Bret Hart, born in Albany, New York, a place where my feet have touched down. My feet have walked through Albany. Died in Camberley, England. So he went over the water. He left here. Author. Genre was fiction and poetry. His spouse was Anna Griswold, like the Griswolds. European Vacation. The Griswolds. Children was Griswold Hart, Francis King Hart, Ethel Hart, Jessamy Steele. Right? But that led me to look more into Bret Hart. Since he was a writer, one thing he did was cover the news. And he happened to cover a story about an Indian massacre in 1860. This is in California. Called the Wyatt Massacre. Who are the Wyatt people? According to Wikipedia. The Wyatt, Wyashishi, Wyam, Shishi, Euchre Creek, Tututni, Weatni, Mad River people, Europe, Weat, Weat, Shook, Weat, Shishi, Weat, Shishi. Like Washishi. Again, Washik. Are an indigenous people of California living near Humboldt Bay, California, a small surrounding area. They are culturally similar to the Yurok people. Wyatt term is Hiktok. They call themselves simply Kukwil. The people. Simply the people. Always the people. Today there are approximately 450 Wyatt people. They are enrolled in several federally recognized tribes. Federally recognized tribes. You know, ones that the federal company recognized, such as the Wyote tribe, also known as the Table Bluff Reservation, Wyote tribe, Bear River Band of the Ronnerville Rancheria, Blue Lake Rancheria, and Cherry Heights Indian community of the Trinidad Rancheria. All right, Trinidad. But let's see what they say about the history. The Wyote and Yurok are the westernmost people to speak an Algic language. Algic. 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 Their languages, Wyote and Yurok, are distinctly related to the Algonquin languages. The Wyote people's traditional homeland ranged from Mad River, Putterwood, through Humboldt Bay, including the present cities of Eureka and Arcata, to the lower Eel River Basin. All right. The Wyotes were among the last natives in California to encounter white settlers. Spanish missions extended only as far north as San Francisco Bay. Following a brief visit in 1806, Russian fur traders, whose 18th century invasion in search of the sea otter had devastated the Pomo. were uninterested in the area, which was not a sea otter habitat. So Russians came hunting sea otters. The way of life of the Wyote people, after many centuries of isolated development, was disrupted by the settlement of Europeans. All right. The Josiah Gregg exploring party spent the turn of the years 1849 through 1850 at Humboldt Bay. Subsequent to their return to San Francisco, several ships set out to settle the bay. The crew of seafarer Douglas Odinger became, in 1850, the first Americans to enter Humboldt Bay. What do you mean, the first Americans? White settlement followed swiftly. Fort Humboldt was established on January 30th, 1853 by the Army as a buffer between what? Native Americans, gold seekers, and settlers under the command of who? Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Robert C. Buchanan of the 4th U.S. Infantry, U.S. 4th Infantry Regiment. Among the miners, farmers, ranchers, and loggers pouring into California, many settled at what is now Eureka. We found it. We found shit. Relationships between the Indians and the outsiders became hostile, marked by raids and vigilante justice. Then came the massacre. Right? On February 26th, day before my son's birthday, Kyrie. The Wyoche experienced a massacre which devastated their numbers and has remained a pervasive part of their cultural heritage and identity. 3 days before the massacre, on Washington's birthday, a logging mill engineer from where? Germany, named Robert Gunther, bought property on Indian Island. The day before the massacre, 25 February, the Weekly Humboldt Times editorialized, quote, "The Indians are still killing stock of the settlers in the back country and will continue to do so until they are driven from that section or exterminated." That's how the media played it. It's like the media be setting motherfuckers up today, nowadays. Right? Meanwhile, prominent local residents had already formed a vigilante committee to deal with the problem and were sworn to never reveal their membership. Sound like a secret society to you? Sound like one to me. For several days before the massacre, world renewal ceremonies were being held at the village of Tuluwat on Indian Island, less than a mile offshore from Eureka in Humboldt Bay. Up to 250 Wioshi participated in the ceremonies. The leader of the Humboldt Bay Wioshi was Captain Jim. Captain Jim was the leader of the Humboldt Bay Wioshi. Captain Jim. He organized and led the ceremony to start a new year. Why he got a name like Captain Jim? Is Captain Jim Indian ness? Is crazy. A group of white men came to the island in the early morning after the last ceremony was completed, and most of the Indian men had left the island, leaving only women and children. The younglings, the women and younglings. The whites were armed with what? Hatchets, clubs, and knives, and had their guns behind, or should I say, and left their guns behind, so the noise of the slaughter would be only screams rather than gunshots. They was on their stealth shit, right? This was not the only massacre that took place that night. Two other village sites were raided on the Eel River and on the South Spit. Reports of the number of Wioshi killed that night vary from 80 to 200. They were mostly women and children. They were mostly women and children. They were mostly women and children who were apart from the men conducting ceremonies. There was one survivor of the massacred group on Tutulawat, an infant named what? Jerry James. Jerry James. JJ. Gunther had been asleep on the mainland across Humboldt Bay from the island and had woken up to what he thought were screams, but went back to sleep. The next morning, he was awakened by who? The Justice of the Peace, who went with Gunther to inspect the island following reports that Indians had been killed. I bet you the Justice of the Peace was a secret member of that. Never mind. He was appalled by what he saw, recalling what a sight presented itself to our eyes. Corpses lying all around, and all women and children, but two. Most of them had their skulls split. One old Indian, who looked to be 100 years old, had his skull split, and still he sat there shivering. Gunther, initially desiring to bring the guilty to justice, or should I say, Gunther initially desired to bring the guilty to justice, but learned, quote, "We soon found that we had better keep our mouths shut," End quote. 3 other attacks on Indian settlements took place within 2 days. At the South Spit, which is Eureka, we found it, and South Fork, Eel River, Ronnerville, and at Eagle Prairie, Rio Dell. Gunther said, it was never publicly known who did the killing, yet secretly the parties were pointed out.